characteristics of a disciple. And Jason preached for us last week about gratitude, and it was fantastic. And this week, our topic is going to be integrity. And I'm seeing if there we go. So, I did something this week. I conducted an informal survey. I asked some people over internet, over the email, just basically people whose names I had in my contacts. And they're all here today, though. I asked them, what is integrity? Or how would you define what it means to act with integrity? And this is some of the things we came up with. One person said, the first thing that comes to mind is honesty. It could also mean morally and ethically outstanding. And I'm trying to click my slide. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. There we go. All right. And another one said, it's holding to core standards or values. For example, honesty without swaying. So we have core standards. Another person said, to say what you mean, to mean what you say, with conviction and accountability. Another person said, also meaning what you say, doing what you promised to the best of your ability, and practicing what you preach. One person compared integrity to baking a cake. There's different ingredients in the cake. There's flour, there's butter, there's eggs. Integrity is trustworthiness, it's reliability, it's responsibility. It isn't just one thing. It's a collection of good characteristics. Being righteous when others are not looking, and I got a chuckle out of this, especially your boss, this one wrote. And one person said, it's described by your actions, whether they're public or private, those actions being at one with your words. Letting your yes be yes, and your no, no. Of course, that's very familiar, isn't it? And finally, this one, I like this one. This person said, holding on to obligations and commitments based on your values, even when it's inconvenient or unpopular. I think those are all excellent definitions. As these people described, integrity is more than just honesty, although that's part of it. It's more than just good behavior, although that's part of it. To act with integrity and to speak with integrity is to match your words and your actions with your values, acting as one with what is true and right, with your moral principles, being true to what you believe, having the courage of your convictions. Integrity is what keeps us focused on what is right when other forces, whether internal or external, want to dissuade us from doing what is right. Integrity is like a compass for our walk through life as we combat forces of peer pressure, societal trends, and even our own worldly desires. There's our compass. Proverbs 11:3 says, the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. And I apologize if it's kind of bright to see. I didn't realize on the computer that the white against the tan there was going to be so. Okay, good. So what's the opposite of integrity? Duplicity, hypocrisy, allowing yourself to settle for a lower standard when the right way is too difficult or too inconvenient. But what does integrity look like when it's in action? What doesn't it look like? Well, to see an example of integrity, let's start with Jesus and one of his many exchanges with some of his largest detractors. This is in Matthew 22, verses 15 through 22, and let's read this. This is the New International Version. Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Teacher, they said, we know you are a man of integrity, and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by men because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, you hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax. They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, whose portrait is this, and whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. Then he said to them, give to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's. When they heard this, they were amazed, so they left him and went away. In the Luke version of this, it says, he saw through their duplicity. So a little background. We know who the Pharisees were generally. We know that they criticized Jesus a lot. But who were the Pharisees? Well, The Pharisees were probably the biggest or most popular of the Jewish sects at the time. They were more progressive than the Sadducees. One of the things they did was they promoted the idea that the synagogue was a suitable place to worship and to pray, not just the temple, and that came out of them being captive in Babylon, so they needed someplace other than the temple. The Pharisees were zealous for Jewish law and Jewish tradition. The word Pharisee actually even means separate, possibly referring to the idea of being separate from the Gentiles. The Pharisee sect actually emerged after a time that's in between the Old and New Testaments, the Maccabean revolt against the Hellenist Greeks. It came out of that, and it was during this time period, okay, so between the Old and New Testaments, that let's get back to Mosaic law, we're Jews, it's the Jewish tradition, it's the Jewish law, none of this Gentile influence. They certainly had no love politically for any force that was suppressing the Jewish people. But of course, they were suppressed by the Romans. So what about the Herodians? Well, Herod the Great is the first Herod we see in the Bible, and he lived during the time of Jesus' birth. And then his sons after him, Herod Antipas and Herod Archelaus. Herod Antipas was named by Caesar Augustus as ruler over Galilee, and after the brother died, Herod Antipas was named by Caesar as his ruler over the Jewish people. He was an ethnarch. So the Herods were subservient to the Romans, and they benefited from Roman rule. So here's a Jewish sect in the Herodians that, in fact, recognizes the authority of the Caesars, supports the idea of paying taxes to Caesar, whom the Romans regarded as godlike, in contrast to the Pharisees, who were zealous only for the Jewish law and customs. So really, the Pharisees and the Herodians had no business teaming up. They had no business being together. They were at odds, except when they wanted to come up with a plot to ensnare Jesus. So their ideas, their convictions are all well and good until it's convenient and easy to put them aside in order to take down who they regarded as a common enemy. They recognized integrity when they saw it in Jesus. Look at the things they said to him. We know you are a man of integrity. You teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by men because you pay no attention to who they are. What a great definition of integrity, and yet they put that aside because, well, they'd rather pay attention to men and be swayed by men because they don't have any integrity. So a couple things we can take from that passage. Integrity, to not be swayed by other people, and the wisdom of your opinion speaks for itself. Whereas with a lack of integrity, you're afraid of other people's view. So you might need to try to trap them in their words. You want to play games with them. You want to trip them up because you don't have the confidence of your own opinion. Here's another passage, another time when Jesus was being challenged, and I guess it's a little small, but we'll read it. This is Matthew 21, just a few pages before that, verses 23 through 27. So Jesus entered the temple courts, and while he was teaching, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him. By what authority are you doing these things? They asked. And who gave you this authority? Jesus replied, I also will ask you one question. If you answer me, I will tell you by what authority I am doing these things. John's baptism, where did it come from? Was it from heaven or from men? They discussed it among themselves and said, if we say from heaven, he will ask, then why didn't you believe him? But if we say from men, we are afraid of the people, for they all hold that John was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, we don't know. Then he said, neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things. Notice that Jesus, in verse 24, didn't say, if you believe a certain thing, if you answer me a certain way, I'll tell you by what authority I'm doing. He said, if you answer me, I'll tell you by what authority. They could have picked one. Surely they had an opinion. Surely they either believed that John's baptism was from God or that it was from men. And whichever one they said, right or wrong, at least they would have shown some integrity to admit that this is what we believe. But they didn't want to do that. They were much more concerned with what people were going to say. We'll look stupid because we didn't believe in John, or, oh, the people will get angry at us because because, we think John is not a prophet. Either way, I wonder what they even did believe. Did they even believe the same thing as each other? Maybe not. We don't even know, because what they believed was not even the issue. What they said was the issue. If we say this, this will happen. If we say this, this will happen. We can be put in those situations too, right? At work or at school, there's a hot topic, controversial topic. What should I say? Well, if I say this, I'm going to catch it. But if I say this, I can go on my way. So those are times that we can look at our integrity. Today, anyone who disagrees with prevailing societal trends will be labeled old-fashioned, closed-minded, bigoted, and intolerant. And if you're not forward with your opinion, don't worry, it'll only be a matter of time before they drag it out of you, before they want to get you on tape or on TV saying something. If you're a politician or if you're on a reality TV show, forget it. They're gonna come at you. Everyone wants to know what it is you believe, but not necessarily because they want to hear what you have to say, but because they want to find out how they're gonna attack you for what you believe. But John 15, 18 through 21 does say, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Remember the words I spoke to you, no servant is greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obeyed my teaching, they will obey yours also. They will treat you this way because of my name, for they do not know the one who sent me. And in Mark 13:13, Jesus says, all men will hate you because of me, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. Our integrity is very important in terms of what we believe. I know oftentimes we think of integrity as being honest at work, but I wanted to start with this point, integrity with what we believe, because it is very easy to get pulled along into the comfortability of, I'm not going to take a stand. Okay. Now, Jesus did decline to answer their question ultimately. And there is a time when maybe we have to be careful about when we speak out. I'm reminded of Jesus saying in Matthew 7, don't give dogs what is sacred, do not throw your pearls to pigs. If somebody really wants to know what we have to say, offer to sit down. Let's sit down with the Bible. Let's look. I'll tell you why I think this is wrong, why I think that's wrong, why I believe this is the path, why I believe that's the path, and we need to be able to do that with courage. But we need to not let ourselves and our faith be just like a sideshow for people that just want to shoot us down. That's sort of a side point, but I did notice that Jesus certainly chose when it was time to debate and discuss and when it wasn't. Let's turn to Acts 4, because as Jesus set the example, his apostles took that example. Acts 4, verses 13 through 20. We've already seen that from that other passage. We'll add to our integrity list confidence in the authority of your views. Jesus didn't hem and haw. Your view doesn't need to justify itself if it's what you believe, whereas without integrity, your views need to fit the official script that's accepted, and you need the approval of others. But let's see what the apostles did when their message was being challenged, not only by other people, but really by the authorities of the day. Acts 4, starting in verse 13. This is after Peter and John had healed somebody, had performed a miracle, actually. When they saw the courage, and then they went on to preach the message once a crowd was drawn. When they saw the courage of Peter and John, they realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men. And they were astonished and took note that these men had been with Jesus. But since they could see the man who had been healed standing there with them, there was nothing they could say. So they ordered them to withdraw from the Sanhedrin, and they conferred together. What are we going to do with these men, they asked. Everybody living in Jerusalem knows they've done an outstanding miracle, and we cannot deny it. But to stop this thing from spreading any further among the people, we must warn these men to speak no longer to anyone in this name. Then they called them in again and commanded them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John replied, judge for yourselves whether it is right in God's sight to obey you rather than God. For we cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard. If we move on down, just want to grab a couple other verses here. Acts 5:17. The high priest and all his associates who were members of the party of the Sadducees were filled with jealousy, and that's why they put the apostles in jail. 5 verse 29, Peter and the other apostles replied again, we must obey God rather than men. And their integrity had an effect. In Acts 5:38-39, we see a Pharisee named Gamaliel who actually started to get it. Whether he ultimately, I don't know whether he ultimately became a believer or not, but at least he saw that these men were speaking with integrity. For he says, after he gives an example of other movements that have failed, he says, therefore, in the present case, I advise you, leave these men alone, let them go. For if their purpose or activity is of human origin, it will fail, but if it is from God, you will not be able to stop these men. You will only find yourselves fighting against God. The integrity of Peter and John stood out. Brothers and sisters, we need to act with integrity among each other and among the church, and it will be noticed. And, you can't, and you see this out there in the religious world as well as it's out there in the world. Somebody espouses a certain belief, and here comes the news article and the tabloid headline a few years later about something that happened, about some secret this person's been hiding. And, it's discouraging. It's discouraging to see someone, a famous minister, preacher, and then it turns out that there's a scandal. That's discouraging because it sends a message, you can't trust what people say, and you can't trust those Christians. So it's very important that we act and speak with integrity, because integrity is what is going to make people stand up and take notice. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul is admonishing the church because he's saying, well, you guys have lawsuits between you. Two Christians have a dispute and you can't even settle it. Instead, you take it to a court of law outside the church. He says, I say this to shame you. Is it possible that there is nobody among you wise enough to judge a dispute between believers? But instead, one brother takes another to court, and this in front of unbelievers. Now, I haven't seen people taking each other to court in our church. We haven't heard that yet. But in today's culture, whatever you put on Facebook might as well be shouted from the rooftops. Here in this information age, it's so easy to engage in gossip and slander. And I'm just going to say, it isn't fair or right, whether on Facebook or not, for us to go to each other with, this brother did this sister did this, I'm struggling with this brother, I'm struggling with that sister, and not just talk it out with one another. Certainly we should have the integrity to not avoid conflict and not avoid confrontation, because otherwise we're just waiting for bitterness to show up, division, and that is what gives Satan that foothold to say, for people to say, look at those Christians, look at those hypocrites. Colossians chapter 3, verses 8 and 9. But now you must rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. That's an easy one. That's obvious, right? Do not lie to each other. But how often do we say, I don't want to talk to this brother right now because I didn't do something and he's going to ask me about it, so I'm going to turn. Or, how you doing? Oh, okay. I just had this bout of sin I need to confess, but I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to go out on the limb and say that there are times when we really need to hear the message, do not lie to each other. Even if it's not a blatant out-and-out lie, there are times when we're just not open and we're just not fully honest with one another. Not avoiding each other, outright lying perhaps, misleading each other, making excuses for things. That is not acting with integrity. Here's another one, Matthew 5, 36 and 37. You have heard it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but keep the oaths you have made to the Lord. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. Simply let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. saying yes and then deciding, well, maybe I'm just going to have to forget. No, that's from Satan. Or saying, no, I'm not going to do that, and then doing it anyway, and creating miscommunication, mistrust. That's from Satan. We need to be reliable. We need to be dependable. We need to keep our commitments. Yes has to mean yes. No has to mean no. If we change our mind, we have to be forthright, apologize, listen, this is what happened. It's sad, and we've all probably seen that, maybe with ourselves, maybe with other people, when there's a situation and you know that there's a certain person that you just can't rely on. Someone just knows, I know that person's going to be late. I asked this person to do it, but I'm not sure if that person's going to come through and get the job done. Because in the past, it's always been the same thing. That's a sad place to be in. You don't want to be that person. You don't want to be the person who walks into class late and everyone's like, oh yeah, here we go again. Or walks into work late and everyone knows you get there at 9:05 or whatever. You don't want to be the person that maybe someone comes to you and says, well, can I really trust you with this? I want to trust you with this. I hope I can. You don't want to be that person. You want to be the person that people know, look, I asked this person to do it. I'm not worried about it. Whatever it is. It could be something at work. It could be something at school. It could be something even in the church. It could be something, in our families. The husband's like, oh, your wife asked you to get something done. I mean, sometimes my wife will say, until you get it done, I have to keep thinking about it because I don't know if it'll get done, whatever it is, fix the banister, And it's been 2 or 3 years already, and so it hasn't gotten done. And so that would be an area where I got to say I'll do it, and I do it. That's integrity. 1 Timothy 4:12, as Paul speaks to Timothy, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in life, in love, in faith, and in purity. Until I come, devote yourself to the public reading of Scripture, to preaching, and to teaching. Do not neglect your gift which was given you through a prophetic message when the body of elders laid their hands on you. Be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholly to them so that everyone may see your progress. Watch your life and doctrine closely. Persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. And one of the newer translations says, watch your conduct and doctrine closely. How you live is your conduct. Does your life match what you teach? When you're at work and someone says, what did you do this weekend? Oh, I did this picnic with my church. Oh, what church did you go to? Do you feel, oh man, I'm the one who's always not getting my work done on time. I'm always late, and now I'm going to say I'm a Christian. I mean, that might be, that might not be. You might be like totally reliable. That's great. Are you the one in class where you're like, teacher, I don't want my homework done? And everyone looks, well, he's that kid that was trying to tell me to go to church the other day. We have to be reliable. We have to be dependable. And it's challenging because we all slip up and we're all the same human beings that anyone is. But we have to strive for this. We have to pray for this, that this is something that's in our character as this whole series, as we get to see what all 12 of these characters are. We have to take it. We have to continue to pray about gratitude. And then we have to add to it integrity. And next week we'll add another one. And we'll just keep praying about these character traits. All right, I got a couple more passages here. 1 Peter 3:15 through 17. In your hearts, always set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. In a similar passage in Titus 2:6 through 10, encourage the young men to be self-controlled. In everything, set them an example by doing what is good. In your teaching, show integrity, seriousness, and soundness of speech that cannot be condemned, so that those who oppose you may be ashamed because they have nothing bad to say about us. Teach slaves to be subject to their masters in everything, to try to please them, not to talk back to them, and not to steal from them, but to show that they can be fully trusted, so that in every way they will make the teaching about God our Savior attractive. Because that's what it comes down to in part. Dealing with integrity helps us trust one another, but dealing with integrity also makes what we have to offer attractive. We all want to bring people to church. We all want to share the gospel with people. We all want people to understand that the gospel is for real, and it's not what they saw in the news about this crazy Christian group or that. There's Christian groups out there that are judgmental. They're going to go and they're going to, be hateful toward people. And there's, we all know the group that goes and they pick at the funerals because of some beliefs that they don't like the belief. That's fine, but then they pick at people's funerals. And then other teachers, other churches that want to water it down because, we have to get with the times as disciples. And when they ask you your opinion, and you give it, and they want to knock you down for it and say, no, you're intolerant, you're closed-minded, but they see your life, they see your marriages, they see your friendships, they see how your kids behave, not perfect, but how they basically are respectful children, and they see that you don't just say a bunch of stuff, but that you live it out, then that's what makes the gospel real in people's eyes. It isn't that you said it. Anyone can say it. Anyone can say, whatever, start quoting passages at work and, put things up on your cube and get a visit from HR. That's, but not everyone, but you have to live it out. You have to live it out. You have to prove. What would Jesus' message, the gospel of salvation, have been if he himself did not have integrity? If Jesus said one thing and did another, if Jesus had been known to drink a little too much, if Jesus had been known to put a little of the gold in his pocket, if Jesus had told his disciples, I'll meet you in the garden, and then where are they? Well, he's running 2 hours late. Oh, I got stuck in traffic, all those donkeys. What would Jesus' message have been? Would it have been something to take seriously? And then when he died, would someone else have said, okay, I can go to the grave with you. I can die for you too. No. A life of integrity is what attracts attention. And today it's tougher than ever. Today people are expected to lie. Oh, I took a sick day. Everyone knows it was a mental health day. You took a sick day the day after Thanksgiving. Of course, you're getting your shopping done, right? Or, I'm almost done means I haven't started yet. We all know this, that in society, it's accepted. Okay, don't ask questions because, and in terms of behavior, our society is sliding downward. Have you noticed that? It seems to be sliding more rapidly than ever before in terms of what's accepted. Not only what's accepted, but how dare you not accept it, I don't know where we'll be in 5 years, 10 years, no idea. But holding firm to integrity through the inconvenience, through the peer pressure, through even the persecution, which will be greater in the future than has been so far, I believe anyway. That's what's going to make us hold firm to the end. That's what's going to make the largest number of people see a church like ours and say, wow, they figured something out. I want to learn what they learned. So integrity, the second of a long list of characteristics of a Christian. I thank you for listening today, and I just encourage everyone to really just take all of these characteristics we've been learning to heart. How can I change in my life? I mean, no sermon's going to hit every point, how it all applies to you, but how does it apply to you? Pray about that one, and how you can set a better example in life and with your integrity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rhonda, for sharing.